You started the podcast in 2014, over 4 million downloads. How did you originally meet Jonathan, and where did the idea of starting a podcast together come from?
Well, I had been, the Trailer Park Boys actually emceed the Gravity Tour. The three boys and Mike Clattenburg came on the road, and I started to get to know Jonathan through the Mike Smith and the boys. So he was always like, when we would be joking around with Rob Wells and JP and Clattenburg, they would always be like, "Oh, you got to meet Jonathan, man. He's hilarious. You guys would really, I think, get along great." And once I did meet him, because we're both really similar, where like, hey, look, there's a blank looking mask, or like, hey, there's a Rob Reiner looking mask bagging groceries at Sobeys, right? Like, we're able to kind of see someone with someone else and then say, hey, doesn't that guy look like this person? And then that person starts laughing because there's enough of a connection for that to, like, Jonathan and I really love doing that. That's kind of our, baseline sense of humor. So every time, that's not all we do, but like, it's just one of the things that those guys were like, hey, you got to meet Jonathan because he does that all the time and cracks us up. So literally the first time I met him face to face, I saw him from far away, I think, and it was at a golf tournament. And I was like, hey, nice swing, Jack Wagner looking Mac, like the Jack Wagner, the actor guy. And then he said, oh, thanks, forefathers of Canada looking Mac. So like really kind of hammered back and forth and right away, and became really quick friends. And I just remember talking to him on the phone anytime I'd speak to him, laughing hysterically at some point. And when I started doing podcasts, like I had my own podcast called Taggart's Take back in 2006. And that was just me and Tim Oxford from Arkell's recording it. And, he helped me just kind of piece together 5-minute clips for The Edge and all these other chorus stations. So I was like, well, podcasting by 2014 started becoming a thing for real. And I was like, well, instead of doing that, which was so much work and, piecing together bits, I just thought it would be funnier. And this by part of going on the Jay and Dan podcast, Jay Onright and Dan O'Toole, their conversations, and then I heard Jonathan go on their podcast, and I was like, okay, me and Jonathan should just do that, where it's conversation. And that was it. We started doing a podcast we tried doing it with guests for about 6 or 7 episodes, and I was like, well, why don't we try doing this without guests? Because it feels like the funniest stuff is when we're just kind of fucking around. And if we can popularize just us fucking around instead and have to, you know more than anybody how hard it is to try and get guests every week. You know what I mean? So, and not to mention, like, you never know what the guest's going to be like. It could be shit, it could be a bad, boring kind of interview. So when you're doing it all the time, it's like you can't expect that level on the other side to be there. So we just felt like our banter was enough. And we were right. It ended up being good enough for people to kind of sit and feel like they're in a conversation. Our podcast is really just that. It's us connecting, and anyone listening feels like they're like in the back seat or like hanging out with us, where, they might even want to jump in on the conversation. So if we do live shows, that's what it feels like even more, where people actually can jump in on the conversation. So we've built something really special. And it really is a pleasure to do it with Jonathan, because he's such a funny guy and super smart and a great person, like really amazing family-oriented guy like myself.